I thank the member and I give the call to the member for Greenway.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to voice the concerns of the Maltese community I represent and the wider Maltese community throughout Australia regarding the cuts to SBS Maltese language services. I am privileged to represent a large Maltese community in this place, and I've worked with that community in the past to ensure they have access to appropriate levels of Maltese content on the special broadcasting service. This community relies heavily on the vitally important language services SBS provides, and the community has made it clear that they want these services to be maintained. The Maltese community has a large older population that relies on language services, as often their English language proficiency is not very high. This demand for Maltese language content is not helped by the comparatively limited availability of Maltese community news outlets in Australia. SBS provides one of the few language services that broadcast such vital community information. As the Vice President of the Maltese Community Council of New South Wales, Mr Emmanuel Camilleri, has said, the Maltese community is getting older, and as there aren't newspapers anymore, radio is the only avenue of news and communication they have left. It is therefore extremely disappointing that, due to the Abbott government's broken promises and funding cuts to the SBS, that the amount of hours dedicated to Maltese language services has been reduced. SBS has announced that the digital-only Maltese programs will be cut. Overall, this will see a reduction in content from 4 hours per week to 2. Understandably, the Maltese community is very disappointed with this decision. One of the few Maltese community publications, The Voice of the Maltese, co-edited by Mr Lawrence Dimmock and Mr Joseph Kutijar, recently editorialised. Without giving a reasonable excuse why they want to discontinue 2 hours from the existing 4 allocated to the Maltese community, SBS Radio once again has disregarded the needs of our community. The Maltese Community Council of New South Wales and the Maltese Community Council of Victoria have also protested this decision, and I have been very willing to support their submission to the SBS to reverse these changes. Today I intend to table the signatures of hundreds of Maltese community members who want these hours reinstated for Maltese community language programs. The community is speaking with one united voice that these are retrograde changes that will have an adverse impact on the community. I did write to the Managing Director of SBS, Mr Michael Abid, on behalf of the Maltese Community Council of New South Wales earlier this year, and I appreciate Mr Abid taking the time to respond. In his correspondence dated the 5th of August, Mr Abid says, "We are unable to extend this 2-year period of additional digital-only programming, as SBS's funding situation has worsened in the 2 years since this announcement, with a further $55 million cut from the government in late 2014. This is the $55 million cut to the SBS that the Prime Minister expressly ruled out the night before the 2013 election. That now infamous interview in Penrith with SBS's Antoninas, in which the now Prime Minister looked down the barrel of a camera and promised no cuts to education, no cuts to health, no change to pensions, no change to the GST and no cuts to the ABC or SBS. These are the words that will hang like an albatross around this Prime Minister's neck all the way up to the next election. This government was elected on a clear platform of no cuts to the SBS, and instead it has delivered millions of dollars worth of cuts that have hit content and have greatly adversely impacted on the Australian community, as these hundreds of signatures will attest. This is a complete and utter betrayal of the Maltese community which relies on these services. I urge this government to reverse its cuts to the SBS, and I table these signatures from the Maltese community.
Thank you. The document will be forwarded to the Petitions Committee for consideration and will be accepted subject to confirmation by the committee that it conforms with standing orders. I give the call to